So for the last year, my landscape photography lens setup has been relatively simple and straightforward. On the Nikon Z7 Mark I have utilised the Nikon 14-30 f4, and I have also used the 24-120 f4 Z-mount lenses. And I honestly think these lenses on the Z7 delivers a near perfect landscape photography setup. They're small, they're compact, yet they deliver excellent image quality. And I can categorically say I have zero intentions of moving away from these lenses anytime soon. However, there's a fairly big glaring gap in my landscape photography lens arsenal. I don't have a telephoto lens. 120mm is the longest focal length I can shoot. And I think my long-term plan all along was to wait, save hard, maybe sell some surplus gear, and eventually purchase the Nikon 100-400 Z-mount lens, which would fill this telephoto void in my life. This would in theory give me a powerful trio of relatively lightweight lenses that would cover pretty much every landscape situation I'm likely to ever encounter, with coverage all the way from 14 to 400mm. Sounded like a good plan in my head back then, but the world isn't the same place it used to be, and I've kind of completely changed my mind. I'm not going to get the Nikon 100-400 Z-mount lens, and the reason is pretty straightforward. It's too expensive. Retailing at £2,700 and with virtually no second-hand market for this lens yet established, I just can't justify ever buying that lens, particularly in the current economic climate. I've also recently become a father, so it's fair to say that my priorities have shifted somewhat. I think if I was a wildlife or sports photographer, kind of shooting in those longer focal ranges more regularly, I could probably justify the purchase, but for my landscape photography, I just can't. A cursory look at my Lightroom catalogue tells me that in the last 15 years of landscape photography, where I've owned many telephoto lenses during that time, a grand total of 6.3% of all of my images have been taken at a focal range in excess of 120mm. I recognise that not owning a telephoto lens in recent months will have skewed the numbers here a wee bit, but it's only going to be slightly. It's as clear as day. I'm either not a telephoto shooter at heart, or I don't live in a location that naturally lends itself to that style of lens. So why the hell would I spend more than the cumulative value of all my other gear on a new lens that I'm only going to occasionally use? It's nuts. Don't get me wrong, the Nikon 100-400Z looks like an outstanding lens with really amazing autofocus, top of the range build quality, exceptional sharpness, and that beautiful native Z mount. If money was no object, I'd probably buy it. But that isn't reality, and it's probably not the reality for the overwhelming majority of enthusiast photographers just like me. With this video, I'm trying to provide some reassurance to those of you out there that feel the pressure to ride the photography gas train. YouTube is absolutely awash with photography channels casually changing camera bodies and lenses every other week. And I truly believe that this can subconsciously make you feel like you're an inferior photographer because you supposedly have inferior gear. It's a load of old rubbish. Honestly, do not let your perceptions of supposedly inferior gear ever hold you back. So rather than having to sell my body to afford the Nikon, I have instead picked up the Sigma 100-400 f5 to 6.3 f-mount lens for DSLRs, and I bought this second hand for less than £400. Yep, you heard that correctly, less than £400. I could nearly buy 7 of these lenses for what the Nikon 100 to 400 would have cost me. I could effectively have a different Sigma lens for each day of the week. Is the Nikon a better lens? Absolutely. Is it 7 times better than this? Absolutely not. I'll need to use my trusty FTZ adapter to mount this F-mount lens to my Z-mount Z7. I've also had to add on a third-party tripod mount to this, with this little collar that you can see around the lens here. So with all of that combined, it gives this a total weight of 1,455 grams, which is only 20 grams more than the Nikon. That's quite amazing, really. Furthermore, the Sigma is only 182 millimeters long when it's unextended versus 222 millimeters for the Nikon. So even when you account for the extra FTZ adapter you're having to mount to it, it's pretty much even Stevens between these lenses in terms of their overall size. Now, before looking into the detail of this, I had always naturally assumed that the Z-mount lens would be smaller than any of these DSLR equivalents, but it just isn't the case at all. The autofocus and stabilization in the Nikon will clearly blow the Sigma away. But as a predominantly tripod-based landscape photographer who shoots static scenes, that matters very little to me. The Nikon's outright optical performance will also obviously be better than the Sigmas, and that's to be expected. But my guess is, in real-world usage for landscape photography, the differences will be marginal, and in many cases, potentially even imperceptible. Also, the Sigma is a slightly slower lens, but again, for my landscape photography, I don't think it matters that much, and if I need to raise my ISO just that little bit to compensate, I can live with that. You know, I recently smashed my 95mm case circular polarizer filter, putting a big crack right through the middle of the filter. I naturally assumed that the filter was done and just needed to be binned. I'd struggle to pay someone to take it off me, let alone sell it. So I naturally purchased a replacement. But while I was waiting for that replacement filter to arrive, I kind of, out of some sort of curiosity, I went out and just shot with a broken filter anyways. Lo and behold, the cracked filter didn't impact image quality whatsoever. Honestly, I couldn't see any difference in the images whatsoever. I was frankly stunned, and to me it really hammered home how futile the pursuit of better and better optical performance can sometimes be. It really is a game of massively diminishing returns, and for constantly pursuing it, you'll be a lot poorer, but not actually that better off photographically. Early impressions of the Sigma are pretty good overall, I would say. It's surprisingly compact and lightweight considering the extra focal reach it grants me, and I think the image quality I'm getting out of this is actually pretty good overall. It's really not going to be the kind of lens that I use that frequently. I kind of see 2 use cases for it. I think the first will be sort of pre-planned images where I'm trying to capture things like moonrises or sunrises, for example. And then the second use case will be hiking up into the hills of the Isle of Man and sniping, shall we say, little long-range scenes when the conditions are favourable. Yes, it's annoying to still have to use the FTZ adapter, It's really clunky, and I kind of hoped that I'd just put it in the past by fully embracing the Z mount. But first world problems and all of that, the Sigma is honestly perfectly sufficient for my needs, and I'm really looking forward to getting out and embracing telephoto photography with it, because I think it's an area that I'm a little bit weak in, to be honest. There are clearly some absolute bargains to be had on the second-hand market for DSLR lenses at the moment, as the move to mirrorless only accelerates. My advice, if you're moving to mirrorless, would be to stop and think, is it really worth sinking huge amounts of money into mirrorless lenses that only potentially serve niche purposes for you? It's very easy to get carried away with the constant bombardment of YouTube photography gear videos which subtly tell you that your equipment isn't good enough. I've found myself watching less of these videos in recent months, and I feel far better for it. If this video can help some of you out there save a bit of money by helping to shine a spotlight on the value that can be found in the second-hand DSLR market, then I consider that mission accomplished. Take care. See you soon.